I have a friend who lives in a strange housing co-op. I don't fully understand how they enforce it, but there's a covenant attached to the properties. You can't take a mortgage on a house there. You have to pay cash. Most people use personal lines of credit and collateralize other things, but no debt is allowed on the houses themselves. And here's the thing. The houses are about half the price of anything comparable in the surrounding area. Half. And they never hit the open market. They get traded quietly among friends and family. No Zillow listing, no bidding war, no investor outbidding a young family at the last minute with an all-cash offer. When my friend told me about it, something clicked. I've been trying to articulate why housing is broken for years, why every proposed fix fails, why the people who need homes the most keep losing, and my friend's weird little co-op handed me the answer in a single data point. Remove the financing. The price collapses to something that looks like actual value. That covenant did by contract what sound money does by design. And today, I want to show you exactly how that works, how the financing, the government backstops, the securitization machine, and the broken money all stack on top of each other to make housing permanently unaffordable for the people who actually need it. And then I want to show you the only thing that unwinds it. This episode involves a genie and a baby. Buckle up. I'm Brian, and this is episode 15 of Love and Hard Money. Before we get into the mechanics, I want to give you an image to carry through this episode. When the first passenger elevator was installed in New York City in 1857 in the Hogwood Building on Broadway, it changed something fundamental about the value of real estate, but not in the way you might expect. Before elevators, the top floors of buildings were the cheapest. Nobody wanted to climb 5 flights of stairs. The ground floor was premium. The higher you went, the lower the rent. Wealthy people lived and worked at street level. The upper floors were for storage, for servants, for people with no other option. The elevator inverted everything. Suddenly, height meant views. It meant quiet, distance from the noise of the street. The penthouse was born. An entirely new category of premium real estate appeared. Real estate that hadn't existed the week before, because the technology changed the underlying value structure of the built environment. I want you to hold that image. Technology as an inverter of value structures, not an incremental improvement, a fundamental inversion. Because that's what Bitcoin is to housing. Not a better mortgage product, not a smarter subsidy program, a technology that removes the reason housing is overpriced in the first place. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To appreciate the solution, you need to understand the problem. And the problem is deeper than almost anyone in the mainstream housing debate is willing to go. Here's one of the most important economic principles that nobody ever states plainly. Anything that can be financed will be priced to the limit of financing. Every time. It sounds almost too simple, but follow it through, and it explains most economic misery of the last 50 years. Start with housing. In 1930, if you wanted to buy a house, you needed a significant down payment, often 50%, and a short-term loan. The price of housing was constrained by the amount of cash people could actually accumulate. When the 30-year mortgage was introduced and standardized through the FHA in the 1930s and 40s, it was sold as democratization. Now ordinary Americans could own a home. The dream was accessible. And, for a while, it was. But here's what the architects of the program didn't fully reckon with, or chose not to say out loud. When you allow a house to be purchased on a 30-year payment plan, the price of the house adjusts to absorb the purchasing power that the payment plan unlocks. The monthly payment becomes the unit of affordability, not the price of the house, and sellers price to the payment, not to the underlying value. My friend's co-op is the proof. Same houses, same land, same neighborhood, no mortgage allowed, and the prices are half. That covenant is the controlled experiment that the mainstream housing debate never runs. It isolates the variable. Remove the financing, and the price reflects something closer to what the house is actually worth to live in. In 1980, the median home cost about 3 times median household income. Today, it's closer to 6 to 8 times in most markets. The 30-year mortgage didn't make housing affordable. It made housing more expensive by expanding the pool of dollars chasing every house. The dream became a treadmill. Dual-income families became the norm. Now, look at student loans. In 1965, the federal student loan program was created with exactly the same logic. Make education accessible, democratize the credential. The price of a college degree has increased by over 1,200% since 1980, roughly 8 times the rate of general inflation. When you guarantee unlimited financing for a product, you guarantee that the product will be priced to the limit of that financing. The universities absorbed every dollar of loan availability and then some. Healthcare? Same story. Medicare and Medicaid created guaranteed government payers, cost inflated to consume the available payment. Americans now spend roughly twice what any other developed nation spends per capita on healthcare with middling outcomes. And if you think healthcare is expensive now, wait till you see what it costs when it's free. The pattern is consistent and the mechanism is always the same. A well-intentioned intervention says, we'll make this more accessible by subsidizing the financing. The market responds by raising prices to consume the subsidy. The people the program was designed to help find themselves in exactly the same position, or worse, because the price floor has been permanently elevated. This is not a left or right critique. Both sides do it. The left does it with student loans, housing vouchers, and healthcare subsidies. The right does it with mortgage interest deductions, zoning protections for incumbent homeowners, and special tax treatment for real estate investors. The mechanism is different. The outcome is the same. The people who pay are the same. And the 50-year mortgage now being floated as a solution to housing affordability? It doesn't solve the problem. It locks it in and extends it across an entire lifetime. Monthly payments go marginally lower. Homes become permanently more expensive. Wealth transfers from young buyers to existing asset holders at an even slower, more grinding pace. It's a policy designed to look like a solution while making the underlying problem structurally worse. Lower interest rates will do the same. So will rent caps, and so will most zoning reform, because at best, zoning reform increases supply slightly while the monetary premium keeps inflating. And the investor class, with cheaper credit, keeps outbidding families at every price point. Supply matters at the margin, but you cannot build your way out of a monetary premium. You can build 10,000 new apartments, and if each one gets immediately monetized by institutional capital with access to 4% credit, you haven't solved anything. You've just added to the inventory of investment assets. There's a step beyond financing that makes all of this dramatically worse. It's called securitization, and that's where the government and the banking system stopped merely distorting the market and started building a machine. Here's how it works. A bank issues you a mortgage. In a world with skin in the game, the bank would hold your mortgage. They care whether you repay it, because if you can't, they lose. But starting in earnest in the 1970s and accelerating through the 80s and 90s, your mortgage gets bundled with thousands of other mortgages, packaged into a security and sold to investors worldwide. The bank collects an origination fee and moves on. They no longer care whether you can repay. They just need the loan to look good long enough to sell it. The government, through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, built the infrastructure for this. The implicit guarantee of those agencies made explicit in 2008 when the government bailed them out, means the securitization machine has a permanent government backstop. The risk of bad mortgages has been socialized. The profits have been privatized. What does this do to housing prices? It removes the natural brake on mortgage origination. Without securitization, banks are limited by their own capital. They can only write as many mortgages as they have deposits to back, at least in theory. With securitization, they can originate infinitely and sell the paper immediately. More mortgages means more purchasing power, chasing the same number of houses. More purchasing power chasing houses means higher prices. And here again, the Cantillon effect operates with brutal efficiency. The institutions that can access the securitization machine, that can borrow against mortgage-backed securities at institutional rates, that can participate in the secondary market, those are not young families trying to buy their first home. Those are the same private equity firms, the same REITs, the same asset managers we talked about in our last episode. The machine that was built to democratize home ownership has become the primary mechanism through which institutional capital systematically outcompetes families for the housing stock. This is what well-intentioned government intervention produces when it interacts with financialization over decades. Emergent catastrophe. A system that was built to help the family and now works structurally against it. The young family trying to build their first home is not losing to a greedy landlord. They're losing to a broken system. Underneath all of this, the securitization, the Cantillon advantage, the financing-inflates-price dynamic is a more fundamental problem. And it's the one that nobody in the mainstream housing debate ever names, even though you can sum it up in 5 words. Housing has a monetary premium. A house has use value. That's obvious. It keeps the rain off your head. It's warm in the winter. It's where your children take their first steps and where you sit on the porch when you're old. For most of human history, a house was priced in proportion to that use value. What it cost to build, plus the value of the land, plus a reasonable return for the owner or the builder. We talked about that the last episode. Then we broke the money, and the house became something else. It started to serve the role money should play, storing value into the future. When the dollar is debased continuously, when inflation silently taxes savings year after year, people need somewhere to put their value. They need an asset that holds its purchasing power, and historically, in the absence of sound money, real estate has been the primary answer for ordinary people. Not because housing is intrinsically a great store of value, because in a world of bad money, it's the best available lifeboat. So, everyone who has savings crowds into housing, not just because they need a house for themselves, because they need a hedge against the debasement of their currency. The monetary premium, the gap between what a house is worth to live in and what it sells for as an inflation hedge, gets added on top of the use value. And as more people pile into the lifeboat, the premium grows. The house that should cost $200,000 based on what it's worth to live in costs $500,000 because of what it's worth as monetary protection. That $300,000 gap is not a housing problem. It's a money problem wearing a housing costume. And this is why every proposed solution fails. You can build more houses, you can reform zoning, you can cap rents, you can subsidize down payments. None of these interventions touch the monetary premium. As long as money is being debased, as long as inflation punishes savings, as long as the dollar is a melting ice cube, people will crowd into real assets. The premium persists. The lifeboat stays overloaded. The only path back to genuinely affordable housing, not cheaper monthly payments, but houses priced at what they're worth to live in, is removing the need to use them as monetary lifeboats in the first place. My friend's co-op did it with a covenant. Sound money does it with mathematics. Okay, when I say Bitcoin fixes this, I know what a lot of people hear. Bitcoin is for people who are already wealthy. The people who got in early made a fortune. Isn't it just replacing one inequality with another? And on top of that, the thing's volatile. It dropped 80% in 2022. How is a volatile asset supposed to be the foundation of something as stable and important as where my family lives? Those are real questions. They deserve real answers, not dismissal. Let's start with the early adopter question. Yes, early adopters have benefited disproportionately. That's true. I'm not dismissing it or apologizing for it. The people who understood what Bitcoin was in 2010, 2011, 2013, and had the conviction and the stomach to hold through multiple 80% drawdowns, those people have been rewarded enormously. They were the pioneers who settled the West. In some cases, they got claims on vast amounts of digital real estate for laughably low amounts of money, or even just for compute power. But they had the conviction to go and to hold on to this thing when the world was shouting them down for 17 years. And here's the critical distinction. Their wealth was not extracted from anyone. It was not created by diluting someone else's savings the way dollars are. There was no central bank printing Bitcoin and handing it to the early holders. The early adopters took enormous risk. Financial risk, social risk, reputational risk, at a time when Bitcoin was widely considered a joke or a scam. There was no exchange in those early days. You couldn't buy Bitcoin in your IRA. They did the work of understanding the technology, understanding money, and seeing a mismatch between the world as it is and the world as it should be. They had the conviction to stand against the crowd and say so. Bitcoin wouldn't be what it is today without pioneers like Andreas Antonopoulos and Hal Finney before him. If some of them got rich and stayed rich through all the FUD, that wasn't grift. It was conviction and proof of work. They were right about something that turned out to matter enormously. The market rewarded them for being right. That is categorically different from the Cantillon effect in the fiat system, where proximity to the money printer, not correctness, not risk-taking, not productive contribution, determines who benefits from new money creation. Bitcoin's early adopter premium is a feature of open markets. The Cantillon effect is a feature of coercion. One rewards what you know. The other rewards who you know. Now, the volatility question. This one is more subtle. I believe Bitcoin is volatile because it is in the process of demonetizing other asset classes. The volatility is not a bug, it's the mechanism. Price discovery on a global monetary asset is violent. Every time monetary premium bleeds out of gold, out of real estate, out of equities, and into Bitcoin, that transition shows up as price swings that look terrifying on a 1-year time horizon and look like a staircase on a 10-year horizon. When Bitcoin was young, speculators treated it as high risk, high reward, and it behaved accordingly. Recently, we've seen signs that it's being treated as a flight to safety play. Over time, as the capital that enters matures and understands it better, it will trade in line with its inherent properties, which are more stable than any other commodity humans have ever had access to. But for someone with $200 in savings and a rent payment due next month, that volatility is a real problem. I won't tell you it isn't. Bitcoin is not a savings account for your emergency fund. It's a long-duration asset for long-duration savings. Putting next month's rent into Bitcoin is undue risk, not because Bitcoin is bad, but because the time horizon is wrong. And the alternative, keeping savings in dollars that lose purchasing power every year, is not the safe choice it appears to be. It is a guaranteed, slow loss dressed up as stability. Okay, a lot of people are structurally unable to save right now, and I want to speak to that directly. Eventually, I believe Bitcoin offers real hope for those people, because as it removes the monetary premium from housing and other assets, everything will get more affordable. But if you wait until Bitcoin becomes the global reserve asset, you will have missed the greatest wealth transfer of our lifetimes. So if that's you, if you feel like you can't save, my encouragement is to start small. Learn about money. Try to free up even $10 a week. A good place to start is a book called The Richest Man in Babylon. I found it on Amazon for under $5 in paperback. It's a short read, and it changed how I think about money long before I ever understood Bitcoin. And if you want to start interacting with Bitcoin in a low-stakes way, get on Nostr. Set up a Lightning wallet, start trading ideas and earning small amounts of Bitcoin through Zaps. It's a decentralized social platform where instead of likes and comments, people tip each other in Satoshis. Pro tip: I zap every cat picture I see. Getting on Nostr is a real way to start touching the technology without putting anything meaningful at risk. Okay, back on track. I want to try a thought experiment. Imagine you live in a world with no bridges, no way to cross rivers except by boat or finding a shallow ford. You're frustrated. You can see the other side. You know there's opportunity over there. And the boat takes forever. So, you find a genie. And you ask the genie, give me the best possible technology for building a bridge. The most advanced, capable, transformative bridge building technology that could ever exist. The genie reaches into the future and hands you a human baby. You look at the genie, you look at the baby, you look back at the river, you still don't have a bridge, and now you have a baby that you need to feed and clothe and keep alive. How does this help me, you ask? I need a bridge. You gave me a baby. Be patient, the genie says. You asked for the best bridge building technology. That's what I gave you. 30 years later, that baby's grown up. He's studied math, material science, and structural engineering. He's developed techniques that never existed before. He builds you a bridge, and then he builds bridges you never imagined. Suspension bridges, cable stay bridges, bridges that span distances your generation thought were impossible. He builds infrastructure that connects community and transforms economies in a way that dwarfs your original river crossing problem. But for those first few years, all you had was a baby. And the baby's critics were not wrong, at least on the terms they were using. He couldn't build a bridge in 2010. He couldn't build one in 2015. He was noisy and expensive and confusing, and people laughed at you for believing in him. Okay, big reveal. Bitcoin is the baby. Did I sneak up on you with the plot twist? The critics who say Bitcoin is too volatile to be a savings vehicle are right on a 1-year time horizon in 2026. The critics who say people can't reliably access it were right in 2012 and are less right every year. The critics who say it doesn't yet function as a medium of exchange for everyday transactions are right in most contexts today. All of those criticisms are evaluating the baby on bridge building criteria before the baby has grown up. What we can already see, what's coming into focus, is that this technology, a global, apolitical, mathematically enforced, hard money, 21 million units, no central bank, no Cantillon effect, no inflation by committee, a monetary layer where the rules are the same for a subsistence farmer in Malawi as a hedge fund in Manhattan. When that monetary layer is mature, when Bitcoin's market cap is deep enough, its adoption broad enough, its volatility compressed enough, what happens to the monetary premium in housing? It bleeds out, slowly, over years and decades. The lifeboat empties. People who can store their value in Bitcoin don't need to store it in a 4,000 square foot depreciating piece of real estate. The doctor who used to buy 5 investment properties as inflation hedges now holds Bitcoin instead. The institutional capital that was crowding out families at every open house finds a more efficient store of value and slowly exits the single-family home market. Housing slowly returns to its use value. And a house priced at its use value is affordable to the people who need it. That's the demonetization thesis. It's not a guarantee, it's a direction. But it's the only direction in which the problem actually gets solved. Not managed, not subsidized, not deferred, solved. It's hard to see this effect in dollars. The numbers are still too big, but you can see it in Bitcoin. A house that used to cost hundreds of Bitcoin now costs a few, and eventually 1 Bitcoin might buy an apartment building. We're in the early middle of a transition. Bitcoin exists. It's growing and maturing. It's been proven as a technology. But the monetary premium in housing has not yet begun to compress in a meaningful way. And the families who need houses today can't wait for the long arc of monetary history to bend in their favor. So how do you live in both worlds? You accept the fiat world as it is, not as it should be. If you need to buy a house to raise your family, to give your children roots, to build a community, to have a place that's yours, then buy it. The monetary premium is real, but so's the value of a stable home. The alternative of renting indefinitely while waiting for Bitcoin to fix everything is its own kind of loss. Of community, of stability, of the intangible things that come from having a place that belongs to you. At least that's what I tell myself when I think about all the Bitcoin I could have bought with what became a down payment. At the same time, accumulate Bitcoin to the degree you're able. Not because it will make you rich, though it might, but because it's the most direct act of participation in the monetary transition you can take. Every Satoshi you hold is a small withdrawal from the fiat system and a small investment in the alternative. Over a long enough time horizon, that matters. Hold both of those positions simultaneously, without contradiction. You can own a home, with chairs, and own Bitcoin. You can participate in the fiat economy today while orienting your savings toward hard money. You can acknowledge that the present system is broken while building your life within it and working toward something better. This isn't cognitive dissonance. This is wisdom about living through a monetary transition. Augustine called it living in the city of man while oriented toward the city of God, participating fully in the present world without mistaking it for the final word on how things ought to be. The families I care about deserve both things: the honest accounting of why the system works against them, and that genuine hope that comes from understanding what fixes it and how to orient themselves toward that fix while building real lives in the meantime. I think about the families in my community who are priced out of the place they grew up. I think about the young people who did everything right and are still losing the game because the rules were changed without their knowledge or consent. This isn't an abstract problem for me. It's a family problem, a community problem, a love problem. Hard money is not primarily an economic argument. It's a moral argument, about what we owe each other. It says you deserve a monetary system that doesn't steal from you while you sleep. You deserve a world where a decade of honest work translates into genuine security. You deserve the ability to save without being punished for it. The 30-year mortgage was supposed to be a gift to families. It became a mechanism for permanent indebtedness and a treadmill that never stops. The securitization machine was supposed to democratize homeownership. It became a device for transferring wealth from the young to the already propertied. Every intervention built to help has been corrupted by the broken money it operates within. Fix the money, the rest follows. Not all at once, not without pain, not without a transition period that requires exactly the kind of wisdom about living in two worlds that I described a few minutes ago. But it follows. The baby grows up, the bridge gets built, and on the other side, there's a world where a normal family can buy a house without turning their entire life into a balance sheet. I'm Brian. This is Love and Hard Money. If someone you know is trying to understand why housing has become so unaffordable and isn't getting straight answers from anyone, send them this episode. That's how we build this. Stack sats. Love your family. See you next time.